In this video, we are going to settle in for 2 hours of Family Guy lore to fall asleep to, but its most boring episodes. Now, before you ask, no, we are not covering Brian's death. We are not covering Stewie's existential breakdowns. There will be no time travel, no multiverse, no profound moral reckonings. Tonight, we are going somewhere far more comfortable than all of that. We are going to the episodes where the most exciting thing that happens is Peter Griffin shopping for a mattress. The episodes where the central conflict is a missing white shirt at the dry cleaner. The ones where a man's entire emotional arc revolves around whether or not he can get his old job back at a beer factory. These are the episodes that critics forgot existed. The ones that sit in the middle of season episode, lists like furniture, nobody notices anymore. They do not appear on any best of rankings. Nobody debates them on Reddit. They are, by every measurable standard, the most uneventful hours in the history of Quahog, Rhode Island. And that is exactly why we are here tonight. Because here is the thing about boring television. It is actually perfect for falling asleep. Nothing jarring is going to happen. No sudden deaths, no shocking twists, just the gentle, predictable rhythm of a family sitcom going through the motions in a fictional New England town where the biggest crisis, on any given Tuesday, is whether Lois will let Peter keep his old mattress. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the soothing hum of absolute narrative nothingness carry you off to sleep. And our journey into the unremarkable begins with one of the most domestically mundane subplots in the entire run of the show. We begin with Season 14, Episode 3, an episode called Guy Robot, which aired on October 11th, 2015. Now, to be fair, the main storyline of this episode involves Stewie building a robot friend named Lyle after getting into an argument with Brian about stolen comedy material. Brian had been performing at a place called the Chuckle Bucket Comedy Club, and his act was bombing because he was trying to do political humour. So what does Brian do? He steals jokes from Stewie's Twitter feed. The crowd loved it, of course. Brian took all the credit, and when Stewie found out, he was furious. He ended the friendship right there and decided he would simply build a better companion. A robot, programmed to learn, to grow smarter, to be everything Brian was not. Which, for the record, is a pretty low bar. Stewie built Lyle and started exposing him to the world, teaching him things, taking him places, and for a while, it seemed to be working. But here is where things get predictably boring. Lyle surpassed Stewie's intelligence almost immediately. The robot then built his own friends, other robots, and they started treating Stewie the way popular kids treat the one who brought the snacks, but is not actually invited to the party. They pranked him. They made him feel inferior. Stewie, desperate for their approval, kept trying to impress them and kept failing. It was Brian who eventually found him still trying to win over a group of machines that had no interest in him. And the grand resolution to this entire conflict, the climactic moment of this storyline, was Brian spraying the robots with a garden hose. That was it. Water from a garden hose. The robots were destroyed, friendship restored. Roll credits on the A-plot. But the A-plot is not why this episode earns its place on our list tonight. It is the B-plot. The subplot so aggressively domestic, so utterly devoid of narrative stakes, that it functions almost like a bedtime story you would tell a child who asks too many questions. It starts with Peter coming home drunk. He stumbles into the bedroom and collapses on Lois's side of the bed. Lois, left with no choice, climbs into Peter's side, and immediately she falls into the mattress. The springs are broken, just collapsed. Peter's side of the bed is essentially a fabric-covered sinkhole, and that is the inciting incident. That is the event that launches an entire subplot, broken mattress springs. The next day, Lois insists they go out and buy a new mattress. So they do. They go to a mattress store, which, if you have ever been to a mattress store, you already know is one of the most soporific environments on the planet. Fluorescent lights, rows upon rows of identical white rectangles, a salesman who cannot give a straight answer about anything. Lois and Peter try out mattresses on their own because the salesman proves to be completely useless, and eventually they just order one on Amazon. Because of course they do. That is what everyone does now. Nobody actually buys a mattress in a mattress store. They lie on 7 of them, feel vaguely confused, and then go home and order one online while eating cereal. The new mattress arrives, and here is where the plot thickens, or more accurately, here is where the plot remains exactly as thin as it was before, but adds a mild domestic disagreement on top of it. Peter is ready to christen the new mattress, as it were. He wants to be intimate with Lois, but Lois says no. She wants to keep the new mattress nice for a while. She does not want it getting ruined immediately. And Peter, a man whose emotional equilibrium is held together with duct tape and Pawtucket Patriot ale, cannot handle this rejection. He goes to the Drunken Clam. He sits with the guys, Joe, Quagmire, Cleveland, the usual crew. And Peter is agitated, he is testy. He is, by his own admission, dealing with a level of tension that is affecting his ability to function as a human being. And the guys, in their infinite wisdom, come up with a solution. They will find the old mattress, they will retrieve it from wherever it ended up after being thrown away, and they will bring it back so Peter can resume his normal life. This leads them through a series of events that only make sense in the context of Family Guy. To the Brookfield Insane Asylum. They go to an actual asylum to look for a mattress. They get captured and declared insane. Every single one of them. Except Quagmire, who is not declared insane because he tells the staff he is there voluntarily, for reasons that are entirely Quagmire related and best left unexamined. Eventually, through a series of misadventures that include stumbling onto a film set, they locate the old mattress. They bring it home. Peter presents his case to Lois. He points to the stains on the old mattress, not as evidence of its poor condition, but as evidence of their shared history. Each stain, he argues, represents a memory, a moment, a chapter of their lives together. And Lois, moved by this argument, or perhaps just exhausted by the ordeal, agrees to let the old mattress back in. They are reunited with their battered spring-shot, stain-covered bed. They make love on it. Everything seems resolved. And then they wake up itching, both of them, covered in some kind of rash or irritation from the old mattress, which has apparently been sitting in conditions that are not ideal for something you press your bare skin against for 8 hours a night. They get rid of the mattress again. Brian dumps the remains of the destroyed robots on top of it at the curb, and Herbert, the elderly neighbour who is a recurring character known for his unsettling tendencies, finds it, and in his words, smells a trap. That is the entire B-plot. A man's mattress breaks. He buys a new one. His wife will not let him use it properly. He retrieves the old one from an asylum. They reconcile over the stains, and then they get a rash. If you graphed the narrative tension of this storyline, it would be a perfectly flat line with a tiny bump in the middle where Peter says something about stains being memories, and then it goes flat again. It is the most beautifully uneventful thing Family Guy has ever produced, and it is absolutely perfect for right now. Because here is the thing about the Griffin household. This is what life actually looks like most of the time. Not the time travel, not the multiverse adventures, not Brian dying and coming back. The real life of this family, the life that exists between the dramatic episodes, is mattress shopping and dry cleaner disputes and arguments about who gets to enjoy grocery shopping in peace. And those are the moments we are exploring tonight. Peter's quest for the right mattress was, in its own way, a quest for domestic comfort. A man who wanted nothing more than to sleep on the same stained, worn-out bed he had always known. There is something almost poetic about that if you squint hard enough and do not think about it too carefully. But comfort in the Griffin household is always fleeting. It is always temporary. Something always comes along to disrupt the mundane rhythm of their lives, even if that something is equally mundane. Sometimes the disruption is not a broken mattress, but a broken career. Sometimes the most boring thing that can happen to a man is losing his job at a beer factory and having to watch his wife take over the grocery shopping. And that is exactly where our journey takes us next. Our journey continues with Season 22, Episode 2, an episode titled Supermarket Pete. And if you thought a mattress subplot was the peak of domestic banality, this episode is here to correct that assumption, because the entire A-plot of Supermarket Pete revolves around one question: who gets to enjoy grocery shopping? That is the central dramatic conflict. Not who lives, not who dies, not who travels through time. Who gets to push a cart through the produce aisle without being annoyed? The episode opens at the Pawtucket Brewery, where Peter works. His boss, Preston, calls a meeting to announce that the brewery will be transitioning to an open floor plan. This means construction, and construction means everyone gets 2 months off. Unpaid. 2 unpaid months with nothing to do. Now, for most people, this would be a source of anxiety. Bills to pay, mortgage, groceries. But this is Peter Griffin, a man whose relationship with financial responsibility is best described as theoretical. So naturally, his first instinct is not to budget or plan. His first instinct is to spend recklessly. Because why would Peter do anything else? Lois, watching the money disappear, tells Peter he needs to get a temporary job. Something to keep the lights on while the brewery is being renovated. And Peter, after what we can only assume was an exhaustive search of his available skills and interests, lands a job at the Stop-End Shop, a grocery store. Peter Griffin, stocking shelves and scanning barcodes and doing all the things that millions of people do every single day without it being the subject of a television episode. And here is where the conflict emerges, such as it is. Lois has always considered grocery shopping her escape, her time away from the chaos of the Griffin household, the one place where she can push a cart in relative peace, evaluate the freshness of produce, compare prices on cereal, and exist as something other than Peter's wife and the mother of 3 children who each present their own unique challenges to her sanity. Grocery shopping is Lois's sanctuary, and now Peter is there, every day in her sanctuary, being Peter. He is not a good employee, that much is clear from the beginning. He is enthusiastic, which is actually the problem. Peter approaches the grocery store the way he approaches everything, with a chaotic energy that is entertaining to no one who has to work alongside it. He makes messes, he disrupts routines, he talks too much to customers. He does all the things that make Lois's quiet refuge into something that feels like an extension of her living room. Eventually, Lois snaps. She blows up at Peter right there in the store, in front of customers and employees, and the fluorescent lights that have been silently judging everyone since the 1980s. She tells him he has ruined her safe space, her one place of peace, and management, witnessing this outburst, bans Lois from the store. She's no longer welcome at the Stop-End Shop because she yelled at an employee who happens to be her husband, who happens to be terrible at his job. Lois, now banned from the grocery store and seething with a quiet suburban rage, decides to get revenge. Her friend Bonnie suggests she take a job at the Drunken Clam, Peter's favourite bar. The idea being that if Peter can invade her space, she can invade his. An eye for an eye, but with beer taps and bar stools instead of shopping carts and deli counters. Lois gets the job. She puts on the uniform. She starts serving drinks at Peter's beloved hangout. And Peter does not notice. He does not recognize his own wife working at the bar. He goes in, orders his drinks, sits with the guys and leaves without ever realizing that the woman handing him his Pawtucket Patriot Ale is the same woman who has been sharing his bed for over 20 years. This is either a commentary on how invisible wives become in their husbands' daily routines, or it is just Peter being Peter. Probably both. Lois is furious that her revenge plan failed because her target is too oblivious to be affected by it. They eventually have a heart-to-heart. Peter convinces the manager to fire him and unban Lois. Everything returns to normal. The brewery reopens. Peter goes back to his old job. Lois goes back to her grocery shopping. The status quo is restored. Nothing has changed. Nothing was learned. And honestly, that is fine. That is the beauty of it. Meanwhile, in the B-plot, Joe tells Brian one of his crime stories, and Brian becomes engrossed. He decides he wants to write a true crime novel based on one of Joe's unsolved cases. This is Brian being Brian, which means he is briefly passionate about a creative project that he will never finish. He and Joe investigate the case together, chasing leads, visiting the family of the victim, trying to piece together what happened, and just when they seem to be making progress, they stumble into a storage unit where they are ambushed by a group of true crime podcasters who all want to solve the same case and discuss it on their shows. A fight breaks out, not a dramatic fight, a fight between middle-aged men and podcast enthusiasts in a storage unit. Joe and Brian, seeing the absurdity of what they have become, decide not to write the book. Brian takes comfort in the fact that Joe appreciated his writing. And that is it. Another subplot resolved by simply giving up. The comfortable mediocrity of Supermarket Pete, where the biggest drama was who gets to shop at Stop and Shop in peace, showed us that the Griffin household runs on low stakes and lower expectations. But it was not the only time Peter's professional life became the centre of an episode so uneventful it could double as ambient noise. Our story continues with Season 12, Episode 9, Peter Problems. This episode opens with what seems like good news. Peter gets a promotion at the Pawtucket Brewery. He is now a forklift operator, and he is actually good at it. He is a master of the forklift, which is a phrase that has probably never been used as a genuine compliment before. But in the world of Peter Griffin, it represents a pinnacle of professional achievement. He is so good that he treats the guys to fun, riding around on the forklift like it is a recreational vehicle rather than an industrial machine designed to move pallets of product. The success is short-lived, because Peter, celebrating his new role with the enthusiasm of a man who does not understand the concept of workplace boundaries, attempts to chug an entire vat of beer while on the job. He passes out. His unconscious body and the forklift careen into an executive meeting. There is property damage, there is embarrassment, and there is a firing. Peter loses his job. Again, because this is a thing that happens to Peter Griffin with the regularity of a seasonal flu. He gets jobs, he loses jobs, the wheel turns. Lois, practical as always, starts nagging Peter about finding new employment. But rather than wait for Peter to figure things out, she decides to take matters into her own hands. She gets a job as an assistant manager at a grocery store. Yes, another grocery store. Grocery stores and the Griffin family have a gravitational pull toward each other that science cannot explain. With Lois working, Peter is left in charge of the household. He has to manage the kids. He has to handle domestic responsibilities. He has to be, in a word, competent. And he is not. But the real conflict of this episode is not about the job or the household. It is about something far more personal and far more boring. Peter cannot perform sexually. Lois comes home from work, ready for some romance, and Peter discovers that he is physically unable to deliver. This is the emotional core of the episode. A man who has lost his job, lost his sense of purpose, and now lost his ability to be intimate with his wife. In a different show, this would be handled with nuance and sensitivity. In Family Guy, it is handled with Peter being humiliated by his entire family, followed by a visit to Dr. Hartman, who provides no useful medical advice whatsoever. Peter goes to the Drunken Clam and tells the guys about his problem. They volunteer to help. Their methods are unorthodox. Their methods are also unsuccessful. Various stunts are attempted, various stunts fail. It is a montage of masculine inadequacy played for mild laughs and maximum cringe. Eventually, Quagmire, who is the last person you would expect to provide genuine emotional support, but who occasionally rises to the occasion, decides that the real solution is for Peter to get his old job back. Quagmire goes to bat for Peter with Angela, his boss at the brewery. Between Quagmire's plea and Peter redeeming what is described as a coupon for a rehire, which is apparently a thing that exists in this universe, they succeed. Peter gets his old job back, and the moment he does, everything else resolves itself. His confidence returns. His ability to perform returns. He finds Lois at the grocery store and tells her the good news. They are intimate right there in the store, which is both a health code violation and a fitting end to an episode that has treated a man's libido as a barometer for his professional self-worth. This is what passes for a complete narrative arc in the more uneventful corners of Family Guy. A man is promoted, a man is fired, a man cannot perform, a man is rehired, a man can perform again. If you wrote this on a whiteboard, it would look like a line that goes up, comes down, stays flat for a while, and then goes back up. It is the narrative equivalent of driving on a road that has one very gentle hill in it. You barely notice you're going up. You barely notice you're coming down. And when you reach the other side, you are in exactly the same place you started. Peter's job troubles were, at their core, about feeling useful, about having a purpose, even if that purpose was operating a forklift at a brewery and chugging beer from a vat. It is a remarkably common anxiety dressed up in the absurd clothing of an animated sitcom, and it is the kind of anxiety that resolves itself not through any great personal transformation, but through the simple act of going back to what you were doing before, which is, when you think about it, the most boring resolution possible, and also the most realistic. But sometimes the pursuit of purpose in Quahog takes even stranger, more uneventful turns. Sometimes it is not about getting a job back. Sometimes it is about imagining the jobs you never had, the careers you never pursued, the dreams you filed away in some mental drawer and never opened again. And when an entire episode is built around characters sitting in a bar, sharing their fantasies about alternate careers that never materialized, you get something that is less a story and more a group therapy session with animation. Our journey continues with Season 22, Episode 12, an episode called Take This Job and Love It. And this one is structured differently from the others we have covered so far. Because instead of a single boring plot, this episode gives us multiple boring plots, all stacked on top of each other, like a layer cake made entirely of mediocrity. It starts at the Drunken Clam. Peter is sitting with the guys and he starts doing something that men in bars have been doing since the invention of both men and bars. He starts complaining about his job. Peter admits that his position at the Pawtucket Brewery was never his dream. It was just something he ended up doing because life has a way of steering people into positions they never asked for, and then keeping them there until retirement or death, whichever comes first. Joe, sensing an opportunity to fill some time, suggests that everyone share what their dream job would have been, what they would have done if life had gone differently, if they had made different choices at different moments. And this simple question, this bar conversation that happens in every bar, in every city, every single night, becomes the entire framework of the episode. Peter goes first. His dream job, it turns out, is being an international spy. He imagines himself as a character named Lap Band, which is already the least intimidating spy name in the history of espionage. Lap Band is on the run from Finnish agents. He escapes using methods that are more slapstick than sophisticated. He is tasked with retrieving a European nuclear device from a villain named Bluffella, which is a name that sounds like it was chosen by someone who had 3 seconds to come up with a Bond villain parody. Peter imagines himself in Belgium, then Las Vegas, then on a rooftop where Bluffella is trying to blow up the city because he wants to get out of a bad timeshare deal. Peter saves the day using a lightsaber he apparently borrowed from Kylo Ren, and the fantasy ends. Quagmire's dream job is set in the 1980s. He imagines himself as an overweight bachelor who invents aerobics by combining his two favourite hobbies, gyrating his pelvis and rearranging vowels. The aerobics craze takes off. Quagmire becomes famous. He goes on The Tonight Show. He meets Jane Fonda. Fonda then sabotages him by stealing his leg warmers before a big taping, and without warm legs, Quagmire's workout routine falls apart. His VHS tapes sell terribly. Fonda shows up to gloat, and then Peter, who is listening to this story, fast forwards through the rest of it at 8 times speed, because even within the context of a fantasy sequence inside a boring episode, Quagmire's story is too boring to sit through at normal speed. Cleveland's dream is to be a member of the Los Angeles Police Department, but one who is close to retirement and mainly interested in the benefits package. His last case involves a cocaine cartel. His partner is a loose cannon cop who Joe imagines as himself. They get removed from the case by their boss but go rogue when they discover a drug bust at the docks. They find out their boss is behind the whole operation. There is a shootout. Cleveland is briefly held in court. He is set free because his actions, while illegal, were justified. And that is the end of that. These are the dreams. These are the roads not taken. And what is remarkable about them is how unremarkable they are, even as fantasies. Peter's spy adventure is generic. Quagmire's aerobics origin story is a sitcom premise inside a sitcom. Cleveland's cop drama is every buddy cop movie from the 80s compressed into 5 minutes and stripped of anything that would make it memorable. These are not grand sweeping visions of alternate lives. These are the kind of fantasies you have when you're half asleep on the couch and the television is on in the background and your brain is just sort of filling in shapes. Which again makes this perfect for tonight. The episode does not build to any kind of climax. There is no moment where the characters realize something profound about themselves or their choices. They share their fantasies, they go home, and presumably they go back to the brewery the next day and do the same thing they have always done. The wheel turns, the status quo holds, nothing changes, and there is a comfort in that, even if the comfort is wrapped in the slight melancholy of unrealized dreams and careers that only existed in the imaginations of 4 men sitting in a Rhode Island bar on a weeknight. If you're still awake and enjoying this, consider subscribing and hitting the like button to help the channel grow. There is still a lot of wonderfully uneventful Quahog lore ahead of us tonight. Now, speaking of uneventful, if the Dream Jobs episode was about imagining bigger lives, our next episode is about the smallest possible life. The life where your entire week is derailed by a missing shirt. Our journey continues with Season 9, Episode 14, Tea Eggs for 2. The A-plot of this episode is so magnificently petty, so profoundly low stakes, that it deserves to be studied in university courses about narrative minimalism. It begins with Peter taking his favourite white shirt to the dry cleaner. He drops it off. He picks it up. Except when he picks it up, it is not there. The dry cleaner has lost Peter's white shirt. Now, in any reasonable person's life, this would be a minor inconvenience. You would be annoyed. You might ask for compensation. You might find a new dry cleaner. You would move on. But Peter Griffin is not a reasonable person, and moving on is not something he does when he feels wronged. Peter goes ballistic. He decides the dry cleaner has stolen his shirt, not lost it, stolen it, deliberately taken his white shirt, and is now wearing it, or selling it, or doing whatever it is that dry cleaning shirt thieves do with their ill-gotten garments. Lois tries to mediate. She tells Peter to calm down. She suggests he invite the dry cleaner over for dinner, which is a uniquely Lois response to conflict. Her husband is accusing a small business owner of theft, and her solution is a dinner party. Peter grudgingly agrees, but the dinner does not go well. Lois pushes things too far by trying to make Peter apologise, and Peter refuses because in his mind, he is the victim here. He is the one without a shirt. What follows is an escalation that would be dramatic if the stakes were not so microscopically small. Peter breaks into the dry cleaner's house. He searches the closet, and he finds a white shirt. He holds it up triumphantly. Evidence! Proof! The dry cleaner is a thief. Except the dry cleaner comes home and finds Peter standing in his bedroom, holding a shirt that does not belong to him. The dry cleaner has a gun, because this is America, and apparently dry cleaners in Quahog are armed. Peter, undeterred, holds up the white shirt and insists it is his, and then he puts it on. And it does not fit. It is several sizes too small. The shirt is not his. It was never his. Peter has broken into a man's home, accused him of theft, and is now standing there, wearing a shirt that is clearly not his size, while the actual owner of the shirt is pointing a gun at him. This is the climax of the A-plot. A man in a too small shirt being held at gunpoint by his dry cleaner. The dry cleaner threatens to shoot Peter, but Peter refuses to take off the shirt, which is a power move that makes no strategic sense, but is very on brand. The dry cleaner, not wanting bullet holes in his own garment, agrees to settle things with a fistfight instead. He beats Peter up. Peter gets arrested. The end. That is the resolution. The shirt was never his. The dry cleaner was innocent. Peter was wrong about everything. He broke into someone's home, got beaten up, and went to jail, all because of a white shirt that was not even the right size. If you wrote this as a short story and submitted it to a creative writing workshop, the feedback would be that nothing happens and the protagonist learns nothing, which is exactly why it belongs on this list. Meanwhile, in the B-plot, Brian is dealing with his own miniature crisis. While waiting to bail Peter out of jail, he meets a woman named Denise. She is a liberal. She was arrested for protesting a Walmart opening. Brian is immediately smitten. He tries to impress her with his intellect, his progressive politics, his entire carefully curated persona of the sophisticated talking dog who reads The New Yorker and drinks martinis. And Denise is only casually interested. She does not reject him outright, but she does not accept his invitation for a date either. This sends Brian into a spiral, because Brian's sense of self-worth is directly tied to whether or not women find him impressive, and Denise clearly does not. Following Peter's advice, which is never a good foundation for any decision, Brian decides to take Quagmire's class on how to pick up women. This is already a disaster in the making. Quagmire's techniques make things worse with Denise, and Quagmire admits that his approach is designed purely for physical encounters, not for building actual relationships. Brian, taking Quagmire's style and applying it with the subtlety of a man who does not understand subtlety, manages to pick up Quagmire's former love, Cheryl Teagues. This forces Quagmire to watch helplessly as Brian treats a woman he once cared about with deliberate disrespect. They end up at a restaurant, Brian with Cheryl, Quagmire with Gillian, Brian's ex, whom Quagmire picked up specifically to irritate Brian. The dinner devolves into trading insults. Both women leave. Brian and Quagmire end up alone outside the restaurant. Quagmire admits he only picked up Gillian to annoy Brian. Brian admits he and Cheryl were probably not going to work out anyway. There is a brief moment where it seems like they might actually become friends. Brian asks for a ride home. Quagmire smiles and agrees, and then, as Brian reaches for the car door, Quagmire races forward and reverses, hitting Brian with the car and sending him flying. That is the end. No resolution, no lesson, no growth. Just two men who tried to use women as weapons in a petty feud, and both ended up alone. One of them with tyre marks and the other with an empty passenger seat. The dry cleaner dispute and the dating disaster exist in the same episode like two parallel rivers of pointlessness, flowing side by side through 22 minutes of television and arriving nowhere. Peter's fixation on a lost white shirt might seem absurd, but it speaks to something real about the rhythms of life in Quahog. The way small, utterly forgettable disputes can consume entire weeks. The way a man can convince himself that a dry cleaner is his mortal enemy over a piece of clothing that was not even his. And the way that even the most trivial conflicts, the ones that mean nothing and change nothing, can feel like the center of the universe when you are living inside them. And sometimes the forgettable extends beyond errands and arguments. Sometimes entire family gatherings dissolve into the unremarkable. Sometimes the people who are supposed to bring excitement and energy into your life just bring bingo and retirement brochures. Which brings us to our next stop on this tour of the mundane. Our journey continues with Season 10, Episode 9, an episode called Grumpy Old Man. And this one is a masterclass in the art of making nothing happen over the course of an entire half hour. The premise is simple. Carter Pewterschmidt, Lois's father, loses his driver's license. That is the event that launches everything. Not a scandal, not a conspiracy, not even a health scare in the traditional dramatic sense. An old man falls asleep at the wheel, ends up in the hospital, and a police officer named Joe Swanson takes away his license. That is it. That is the spark. The episode opens in winter. Quahog is cold. Lois's parents, Carter and Babs, have taken Stewie away on a trip. Carter is driving, and Carter, a man who has run a multi-billion-dollar corporation and presumably navigated boardrooms full of sharks and hostile takeover attempts, cannot stay awake behind the wheel of a car. He falls asleep. There is an accident. He ends up in the hospital. Nobody is seriously injured, but the consequence is clear. Joe arrives and takes Carter's driver's license, and Carter, who has spent his entire life being in control of everything, now cannot legally drive himself to the store. This sets off a chain of events that is less a plot and more a slow, gentle drift toward resolution. Babs and the Griffin family talk Carter into retiring, not because of the accident specifically, but because the accident has revealed something that everyone already knew, but nobody wanted to say out loud. Carter is old, he's tired. He has been running his company and his life at full speed for decades, and the machine is starting to slow down. Retirement, they suggest, might be nice, a change of pace, an opportunity to relax. Carter does not want to relax. Carter is the kind of man who equates relaxation with death, which is not entirely inaccurate for certain personality types, but he grudgingly agrees to at least consider it. And what follows is one of the most uneventful stretches in all of Family Guy. The guys and the Griffins suddenly find themselves stuck with Carter hanging around. He has nothing to do. He follows Peter around. He sits at the Drunken Clam with men who are several decades younger than him and several tax brackets below him. He is a billionaire retiree haunting a middle-class bar in Rhode Island, and nobody knows what to do with him. Peter and Lois come up with a plan. They will take Carter and Babs to Florida to look at retirement communities. This is what families do when they do not know what else to do with aging parents. They drive them to Florida and show them places with names like Sunshine Estates and Golden Palms and whatever other euphemisms the real estate industry uses to describe buildings where people go to wait. Carter looks around and immediately hates it. Of course he does. This man built an empire. He did not build it so he could play shuffleboard with strangers in a gated community. But Peter, in one of his rare moments of actual usefulness, talks Carter into giving it a chance. Just one day. One day of the Florida retirement lifestyle. They go shopping, they play bingo, they eat early dinners, they do all the things that people in retirement communities do, and somehow, against all odds, Carter starts to enjoy it. The bingo is not terrible. The shopping is convenient. The pace of life is slower, yes, but slower does not necessarily mean worse. It just means different. Carter and Babs decide to stay. The Griffins leave them in Florida and drive back to Quahog. 6 months pass. 6 uneventful months during which we can only assume Carter played a lot of bingo and Babs decorated their new living space with seashell-themed accessories. And then Lois gets a call from her mother. Something is wrong with Carter. The family rushes back to Florida and finds him listless and unresponsive. Not dead, not dying, just gone. The spark that had kept him running all those years, the drive that built Pewterschmidt Industries, has simply flickered out. He sits in a chair and stares at nothing. He does not respond to conversation. He has, in the most undramatic way possible, given up. Peter, who caused this problem by convincing Carter to retire in the first place, comes up with a solution. He takes Carter back to his office at Pewterschmidt Industries. He sits him behind his desk. He starts issuing a series of instructions for the company, deliberately making bad decisions until Carter cannot take it anymore. The instinct kicks back in. Carter snaps out of his funk, takes control of his company again, and declares that he will never retire. They agree to never try putting him in a nursing home again. Peter's mother calls from her nursing home to complain, and Peter remains non-committal about visiting. Lois makes sure she stays there. The end. This episode is about retirement. That is genuinely the subject matter. An old man retires, gets depressed, and unretires. The narrative arc is a man sitting down and then standing back up. If you were to describe this episode to someone who had never seen Family Guy, they would assume you were describing a documentary about aging in America, not an animated comedy. And yet it works beautifully as sleep content because the entire emotional register of the episode is muted. Nothing spikes, nothing crashes. It is just the gentle hum of an old man's life, decelerating and then slowly accelerating again. Like a car pulling out of a rest stop. You are parked, now you are moving. Nothing dramatic happened at the rest stop. You just sat there for a while. The quiet resignation of Carter's retirement and his eventual return to the only life he understood showed us that sometimes the most boring episodes are also the most honest. A man who cannot sit still. A family that does not know what to do with him. A solution that involves nothing more complicated than sitting someone behind their desk and letting muscle memory take over. These are not the building blocks of great television, but they are the building blocks of real life. And real life, most of the time, is profoundly uneventful. Our journey continues with Season 14, Episode 1, Pilling Them Softly. This is the season premiere of Season 14, which aired on September 27th, 2015. Now, you might expect a season premiere to be a significant episode, a statement of intent, a declaration that the show is back and ready to deliver its best material. Instead, we get an episode about ADHD medication and a cooking show rivalry. The show returned from hiatus, and its first order of business was to tell us a story about Quagmire learning to cook. The main plot begins with Lois picking up Stewie from preschool. His teacher pulls Lois aside and tells her that Stewie has problems paying attention in class. Now, Stewie Griffin, a child who has built time machines, constructed ray guns, and plotted to take over the world on multiple occasions, apparently cannot focus during circle time. The teacher recommends medication. Lois takes Stewie to Dr. Hartman, who provides a prescription for ADHD medication without what seems like a particularly thorough evaluation. Stewie takes the pills and immediately becomes a zombie. He wanders the house in a medicated haze, lethargic and disconnected from everything around him. Brian, who fancies himself an authority on matters he knows nothing about, objects to Stewie being on medication. He rants against drugs of all sorts. He makes speeches about the over-medication of children in America. And then, in a twist that surprises absolutely no one who's been paying attention to Brian's character, over the course of the series, he steals the pills for himself. He pretends to throw them away, but actually keeps them. And soon, he is the one strung out, frantically working on a model in the basement for a story pitch that only makes sense to him in his amphetamine-adjacent state. Brian drags Stewie to a book fair to see George R.R. Martin. He wants to show Martin his model and pitch his book. When they arrive, Brian gives his presentation in a state that can only be described as chemically enhanced mania. Martin, the author of one of the most successful fantasy series in literary history, dismisses Brian's work as, and this is the actual phrasing, poor crap. The judgment brings Brian back to earth. He and Stewie agree that they do not need the pills after all. And just as this moment of clarity arrives, the real George R.R. Martin shows up and chases off an imposter who had taken his place, which is a detail that adds nothing to the plot but is very Family Guy. That is the A plot. A child is medicated. A dog steals the medication. The dog pitches a terrible book to a famous author while high. The author says no. Everyone agrees pills are bad. It is the kind of story that an after-school special would tell if after-school specials had no budget and no commitment to educational content. But the B plot is where this episode truly earns its place on our list. Because the B plot is about cooking. Just cooking. The guys are at the Drunken Clam and they are bored with each other's stories. Jerome, who runs the bar, is considering improving his menu. Quagmire tries Jerome's food, finds it disgusting, and decides to prove that he knows his way around a kitchen by inviting everyone over for dinner. And to everyone's surprise, including probably his own, Quagmire is actually a good cook. The food is genuinely impressive. The guys are stunned. They encourage him to pursue cooking professionally. This leads to Quagmire auditioning for a cooking show. Peter joins him at the audition for moral support, and Peter's humour during the audition gets them hired as a team. It is a cooking show with two hosts. Quagmire cooks, Peter does comedy. For a moment, it seems like it might work. It does not work. Peter's stunts wear on Quagmire's nerves. His antics get in the way of the actual cooking. Quagmire fires Peter, but the show's producer, seeing an opportunity, offers Peter his own cooking show. Now there are two competing cooking shows. Quagmire's show is disrupted by the chaos happening on Peter's show next door. The rivalry escalates. Quagmire demands that one of them has to quit. The producer suggests a cook-off to decide who stays. The cook-off happens. Joe assists Quagmire. Cleveland assists Peter. Their secret ingredient is butter. An accident during the competition reduces Quagmire to tears. Peter, seeing his friend's distress, realizes he has nearly ruined Quagmire's dream. He eats his entire entry, forfeiting the competition and allowing Quagmire to win. It is a moment of genuine sacrifice, buried inside a subplot about a cooking show that nobody outside of fictional Quahog will ever watch. But here is the kicker. Quagmire wins the cook-off, and then immediately admits that he preferred being friends with Peter over having a cooking show. They both agree to get fired together by imitating Paula Deen on camera. Cleveland, back at the Clam, angrily points out that they could have just quit. And he is right. They could have. The entire cooking show arc, the rivalry, the cook-off, the emotional sacrifice, all of it could have been avoided by two men simply deciding to walk away. But that would not have filled 22 minutes. And 22 minutes is what needed to be filled. Interestingly, this episode won Seth MacFarlane an Emmy for Outstanding Character Voiceover Performance. An Emmy for an episode about ADHD pills and a cooking competition, which just goes to show that sometimes the most unremarkable stories are held together by the remarkable work happening underneath them. The writing may not have been breaking new ground, but the performances carried it. And that is true of a lot of these episodes. The plots are forgettable, but the characters are not. The stories dissolve from memory the moment they end, but the voices stay with you, which is exactly what you want when you're trying to fall asleep. Familiar voices telling you stories that do not matter about things that never happened. Speaking of things that do not matter, our next stop involves men who are bored with their wives, a road trip to the deep south, and a prison escape that is somehow less exciting than buying a mattress. Our journey continues with Season 10, Episode 8, Cool Hand Peter. Now the title is a reference to the Paul Newman film Cool Hand Luke, which is about a man who refuses to conform inside a brutal prison system. That film is a classic of American cinema. It is powerful and intense and deeply meaningful. This episode of Family Guy is about 4 men who are bored with their wives and end up doing yard work in Georgia. The comparison ends at the title. The episode opens with Peter, Joe, Quagmire, and Cleveland doing what they spend most of their free time doing, which is sitting around and complaining. This time, they are complaining about domestic life, the routine, the predictability, the way every day blurs into the next when your existence revolves around going to work, coming home, eating dinner, watching television, and going to sleep only to do it all again tomorrow. This is not a uniquely Quahog problem. This is the human condition, distilled into 4 men sitting in a living room in Rhode Island, wishing they were somewhere else. They decide to take a stand against their wives. They're going on a road trip to the Deep South, to New Orleans. This is their rebellion against monotony. 4 middle-aged men in a car driving south, presumably listening to classic rock and not talking about their feelings. It is the kind of plan that sounds exciting for about 45 minutes and then becomes its own version of the monotony they were trying to escape. Because road trips are mostly just sitting in a car for a long time while the scenery changes slowly. On the way to New Orleans, they run into trouble. A crooked police department in Georgia pulls them over. The officers are corrupt, the justice system is broken, and Peter and the guys who are supposed to be on an adventure end up with a one-way ticket to Dungarees County work camp. They are sentenced to 2 weeks of manual labour. This is supposed to be the dramatic turn, the moment where the boring road trip becomes something exciting. Instead, it becomes boring in a different way. They are doing hard labour in the Georgia sun. They are digging. They are carrying things. They are working even harder than they do at home, which is exactly the irony the episode is going for, but does not quite land with the force you would want. When their original 2-week sentence gets extended to 30 days, and the guards hint that it might go even longer, the guys decide to escape. This is the part where you would expect the episode to kick into a higher gear. A prison escape should be thrilling. It should be tense. Instead, it is over almost as soon as it begins. Joe comes up with a quick plan to distract the guards. Peter uses what the episode describes as his seductive ways to fool the sheriff, which is a phrase that raises more questions than it answers. They hop a freight train back to Quahog. When they arrive, the sheriff and his men are already waiting for them. But Joe had placed a call to his friends on the Quahog Police Department during a lunch stop along the way. The Quahog officers surround the corrupt Georgia officers. Joe shoots the sheriff in the leg, orders him out of town, and that is the end of the adventure. The escape is over. The conflict is resolved. The guys are home. Meanwhile, back in Quahog, Lois has been spending quality time with the girls. They got drunk. They dressed Brian in a bumblebee costume. They plotted another prank for Stewie, who responded by drawing a gun, because Stewie is always armed, and nobody in this family questions it anymore. The episode ends with Peter acknowledging that they have done this kind of wrap-up, where the characters summarise what they learned hundreds of times before, so instead of actually delivering a moral or a lesson, he just mumbles the cadence, the rhythm of a conclusion without any of the content. Lois picks up the mumbling. The family joins in. Nobody says anything meaningful. They just make the sounds that meaningful things would sound like if anyone bothered to say them. It is the most honest ending in the history of the show, an admission that there is nothing left to say, delivered in a way that acknowledges the formula has been repeated so many times that even the characters are bored of it. Cool Hand. Peter is a road trip episode where the road trip is not interesting, a prison escape where the escape is not exciting, and a moral lesson where the lesson is that there is no lesson. It is 22 minutes of television that begins with boredom, passes through boredom, and ends with a family mumbling because they're too bored to finish their own sentences. It is exactly what we are looking for tonight. Our journey continues with Season 14, Episode 7, Hot Pocket Dial. And if the mattress episode was about the mundane crises of domestic life, and the dry cleaner episode was about the mundane crises of personal property, this episode is about the mundane crisis of overhearing something you were not supposed to hear on a phone that accidentally called you from someone's pocket. The episode begins at a fancy restaurant. The Griffin family is dining out. Peter discovers the joy of using a toothpick after the meal, which transforms him briefly into a stereotypical tough guy. He starts walking differently, talking differently. He is doing the thing that men do when they find a small object that makes them feel more masculine, which is ridiculous, but also completely accurate. When he accidentally swallows the toothpick, he has to go back to the steakhouse for another one. But when he sees an elderly woman using one, the mystique evaporates and his need for toothpicks ends. This is the cold open. A man's identity briefly shifts because of a toothpick. That is the level of significance we are operating at tonight. At the restaurant, they run into Quagmire and his parent Ida. Quagmire invites them to join for dinner. Everything is pleasant. Everything is normal. The kind of evening that happens thousands of times a day in restaurants across America and generates 0 stories worth telling. But after Peter and Lois get home, Peter checks his phone and discovers something. Quagmire accidentally called him during the dinner. A pocket dial. A hot pocket dial, as the title suggests. And on that accidental call, Peter overhears Quagmire admitting to Ida that he has a crush on Lois. Quagmire, who has been Peter's friend and neighbour for years, has feelings for Peter's wife. Now, in a more dramatic show, this revelation would be the catalyst for something significant. A confrontation, a reckoning, a fundamental shift in the dynamics of a friendship. In Family Guy, it becomes the catalyst for Peter being annoying about it for the rest of the episode. Peter shares the information with Brian, who tells him he is probably making too big a deal out of it. Brian is right. Peter ignores this advice. At a neighbourhood picnic, Peter cannot control his jealousy. Every time Quagmire says something, even something completely innocent, Peter interprets it as a threat. Eventually, he confronts Quagmire in front of everyone. He tells the entire neighbourhood about the pocket dial, about the crush, about the private confession that was never meant to be heard by anyone. Quagmire is mortified. His private feelings, the kind of thing a person admits in confidence and hopes will never leave the room, have been broadcast to everyone he knows. He and Peter fight. Peter orders the picnic shut down. Days go by. Peter cannot let it go. Lois, meanwhile, is amused by the whole thing. She is flattered that Quagmire has a crush on her and is not remotely threatened by it. She tries to reassure Peter. She is not leaving him. Quagmire is not a threat. This is not a situation that requires this level of emotional response. Peter does not care. He wants Quagmire to be punished, not for doing anything, just for feeling something, for having an emotion that Peter did not authorize. And this stubbornness pushes Quagmire to a decision. He decides to move away from the neighbourhood. He is too embarrassed to stay. His private feelings were made public. His friendship with Peter is broken, and the simplest solution is to just leave. At the Drunken Clam, the remaining guys find it hard to converse without Quagmire. There is a gap, a void where Quagmire's voice used to be. And Peter, alone at home, starts to mope. He misses his friend. He is miserable. But he will not admit it, because admitting it would mean acknowledging that he overreacted, and Peter Griffin does not acknowledge overreactions. He just has them and expects everyone else to adjust. Lois eventually takes matters into her own hands. She tracks down Quagmire and forces the two of them to sit in the same room and talk. Acting as a mediator, she gets everyone to admit their secret thoughts. Peter admits he was afraid of losing Lois. Quagmire admits his feelings, but agrees to suppress them. They shake hands. The friendship is restored. The status quo returns. Nothing has changed except that Quagmire now has to pretend he does not feel something he clearly feels, and Peter has to pretend he was never threatened by something that clearly threatened him. Which is, when you think about it, how most adult friendships work. Everybody agrees to ignore the uncomfortable things so that the comfortable routine can continue. This episode is about a butt dial, a phone call that was never meant to happen, revealing feelings that were never meant to be shared, causing a conflict that was never necessary. The entire emotional arc of the episode could have been avoided if Quagmire had put his phone in a different pocket, or if Peter had not checked his voicemail, or if either of them had simply decided that some things are better left unheard. But they did not. And so an accidental phone call became a neighbourhood crisis, a friendship rupture, and a near relocation, all resolved by a woman who told two men to sit down, shut up, and get over themselves. And with that, we drift deeper into the comfortable void of Quahog's least memorable moments. The butt dial crisis is behind us. The mattress is gone. The dry cleaner has been cleared of all charges. The cooking show has been cancelled. And yet there is more, because Family Guy has been on the air since 1999, producing over 400 episodes across 24 seasons, and in a catalogue that large, there are entire stretches of television that exist for no other reason than to fill a time slot. Not every episode can be Road to the Multiverse. Not every episode can be the one where Brian dies. Some episodes just have to be there, quietly occupying their 22 minutes, asking nothing of the audience and offering nothing in return. And those are the episodes we are celebrating tonight. Our next stop on this tour of the mundane takes us to Season 18, Episode 19, Holly Bibble. And this episode is a special kind of boring. Not boring because nothing happens, but boring because everything that happens is something you have already seen before in a different show, done better, a long time ago. The premise is this. The Griffin family is stuck in a motel room. There is a hurricane outside. They cannot leave. They are trapped in a small space with nothing to do. And in this motel room, on the nightstand, there is a Bible. The Gideon Bible. The one that appears in every motel room in America, placed there by a group of people who believe that weary travellers might find spiritual comfort between the pages of a book they did not ask for. Peter picks it up, and the family proceeds to act out Bible stories with themselves as the characters. Now, if this sounds familiar, it is because The Simpsons did this exact premise in their 10th season, in an episode called Bible Stories. Family Guy, a show that has been accused of borrowing from The Simpsons approximately once per season, took the same concept and applied its own aesthetic. The Griffins instead of The Simpsons. Quahog instead of Springfield. The same biblical source material, retold with different yellow skin and a different animation style, except Family Guy characters are not yellow, but you understand the point. The first story is Adam and Eve. Peter and Lois are the first man and woman. God warns them not to eat the apples and not to put their penises in the gopher holes, which is a sentence that exists in a television script that someone was paid to write. Despite the warning, Adam is focused on eating an apple. A serpent convinces Eve to eat them and share them with Adam. God returns, discovers the transgression, and kicks them out of paradise. He sends them to Jacksonville, Florida, which is presented as the opposite of paradise. The family then has a conversation about how Adam and Eve's descendants procreated, which disgusts Meg. This conversation exists purely to fill time and does not advance any narrative. The second story is Noah's Ark. Noah, played by Peter, breaks the news to his wife that he is building an ark. He steals wood from the front of his neighbour's house. He sorts out the animals. He tries to teach his son to sail. He intentionally leaves out spiders and snakes. Boredom sets in on the ark, because even in a biblical flood narrative, this episode cannot generate sustained interest. They eventually spot land. Peter closes with a comment about biblical inbreeding. Chris and Peter vow no more butt stuff. Stewie prays for more rain. None of this connects to anything. None of this builds toward anything. The third story arrives after a brief interlude where Lois tries to leave the motel to get food and runs into Cleveland in the parking lot, which frightens her back inside. They find crackers and wine in the mini fridge, which reminds Peter of communion, which leads to the third story. Jesus and the Last Supper. Jesus, having recently dyed Easter eggs, tells Mary Magdalene that he is having dinner with the guys. Pontius Pilate arranges a deal with Judas. They place their order at the Last Supper and get their photo taken. Jesus reveals he will be betrayed. He tries to share communion but keeps getting interrupted by a birthday song at a nearby table. He offers to postpone communion for a week. The centurions arrive and arrest him. That is the episode. 3 Bible stories, loosely connected by the framing device of a family stuck in a motel. No A plot, no B plot. No character development, no thematic throughline. Just 3 vignettes that exist independently of each other, held together by the thinnest possible narrative frame. The hurricane ends, the power comes back on. The family races to the Applebee's next door. The last one to arrive has to pay. They push Meg down. Off camera, they run across a 6-lane highway and get into an altercation with a passing motorist. The episode ends with Chris keeping the Bible and imagining himself as a night security guard who reads it constantly. He then encounters Dianetics, admits he has not read it but believes in it, and the episode cuts to him accepting a film award and claiming Scientology is why he is not gay. This final sequence, which has nothing to do with anything that came before it, is the kind of ending that suggests the writers had reached the end of their outline and simply threw in whatever was lying around on the table. Holly Bibble is an anthology episode, and anthology episodes in animated sitcoms are almost always the least engaging installments of any season. They break the continuity. They abandon the characters as we know them. They remove the stakes entirely, because nothing that happens in a retelling of a Bible story is going to affect the Griffin family when the credits roll. These episodes exist because they are easier to write than original stories. They fill a spot on the schedule. They allow the animation team to draw different backgrounds. And they provide content for viewers who are not paying close attention, which is all of us right now, and that is perfectly fine. Our journey continues with Season 14, Episode 4, Peter Normal Activity, and despite the horror-themed title, there is nothing remotely scary about this episode. There is barely anything remotely interesting about it. But it does feature 4 men beating an innocent man to death and then covering it up, which sounds dramatic until you realise the emotional weight of that act is treated with roughly the same gravity as Peter losing his shirt at the dry cleaner. The episode begins with Peter, Quagmire, Cleveland, and Joe going to a horror movie. They are disappointed. They believe they could write a better movie themselves. This is a common delusion shared by people who watch movies and people who have never written anything, and Peter qualifies as both. They start bouncing around ideas. Peter suggests a monster cat film. Cleveland pitches a zombie story set in an abandoned hospital. Someone suggests an evil bar of soap. None of these ideas are good. They know none of these ideas are good, but instead of abandoning the project, they decide to go to an actual abandoned asylum to get inspired. This is the decision that drives the plot. Going to an abandoned building at night because you cannot think of a horror movie idea. Not researching, not watching classic horror films, not reading scripts, just physically going to a creepy place and hoping that fear will translate into creativity. It is the least efficient creative process imaginable, and it leads exactly where you would expect it to lead. At the asylum, they start pitching more ideas in the dark. They hear a noise. They try to leave. The door is locked. They crawl through a vent and end up in the basement. Near another exit, they encounter a man with a hook. This is the moment that should be terrifying. A man with a hook in an abandoned asylum at night. But Peter and the guys decide that since they outnumber him 4-1, the appropriate response is to tackle him. They beat him to death, and then they discover he was not a maniac with a hook. He was a decorated military veteran who was trying to help them find their way out. They have killed an innocent man. This should be devastating. This should be a turning point in the episode. The moment where comedy gives way to something darker and more reflective. Instead, it gives way to a cover-up plot that is played for mild laughs. Quagmire wants to turn themselves in. Joe vetoes that idea, which is ironic given that Joe is a police officer sworn to uphold the law. They bury the body. They spot his car. They bury that too, in a second hole. 2 holes, dug in the same night, to hide the evidence of a crime committed by 4 men who went to a haunted building because they wanted to write a screenplay. Back at home, the guilt settles in. But it settles in as comedy, not as drama. Lois chews out Peter for not doing the dishes, and he almost confesses because he thinks she knows his secret. She drops innocent lines about cleaning up messes, and Peter's nerves interpret each one as an accusation. The other guys are having the same experience. They are all paranoid. They are all reading hidden meanings into everything their families say. In a twist that turns the paranoia into farce, each of them, independently, decides to frame one of the others. Peter plants evidence at Quagmire's house. Quagmire plants evidence at Joe's house. Joe plants evidence at Cleveland's. And Cleveland plants evidence at Peter's. They all show up with shovels, ready for a confrontation, only to discover that every single one of them had the same idea at the same time. Nobody trusts anybody. Everybody tried to betray everybody. And then they realise something. Their actual situation, 4 friends who committed a crime and then immediately tried to frame each other, is a perfect horror movie plot. They pitch it to each other. They think about it for a moment, and they decide it stinks just as much as every other horror idea they have had. So the murder, the burial, the mutual betrayal, the paranoia, all of it was for nothing. Not even a usable screenplay came out of it. The episode closes with them passing a newspaper box. A headline reveals that the man they killed, the veteran with the hook, had his military honours faked. He was not actually a decorated hero. He was a fraud. This information makes the guys feel better about killing him, which is a moral framework that would make a philosophy professor weep. And in the final shot, back at the asylum, a hooked hand emerges from the dirt alongside a car door, suggesting that the man is not actually dead, or that he is a zombie, or that the writers wanted one more visual gag before the credits. Meanwhile, in the B plot that I have not mentioned because it's even less consequential than the A plot, Brian gets new glasses and starts acting more pretentious than usual, which is saying something. Stewie is so annoyed by Brian's intellectual posturing that he spends the entire subplot trying to destroy the glasses. He enlists Chris to break into Brian's locker at a spa. Chris screws it up and locks them both in a sauna. Eventually, Stewie just hits Brian in the face with a baseball bat to shatter the glasses. Problem solved. Subplot ended. Nobody grew as a person. Peter Normal Activity is an episode that contains a death, a burial, a cover-up, mutual betrayal, and the discovery that the victim was a fraud, and somehow manages to make all of it feel like a long walk to nowhere. The murder has no consequences. The paranoia is played for laughs. The moral crisis is resolved by a newspaper headline. And the biggest emotional investment in the episode is Stewie's vendetta against a pair of glasses. These anthology and misadventure episodes sit in a peculiar space in the Family Guy catalogue. They are not good enough to be remembered, and not bad enough to be infamous. They occupy the vast middle ground where television goes to exist without being noticed. And in that middle ground, there is a kind of peace, a quietness that comes from knowing that nothing important is happening and nothing important needs to happen. The characters will be fine. The status quo will hold, the credits will roll, and tomorrow the Griffins will wake up and do something equally forgettable. That predictability is a gift when you're trying to fall asleep. No surprises, no twists, just the steady pulse of a show that has been going through these motions for over 2 decades and will continue going through them for years to come. Our journey continues with Season 14, Episode 5, Peter, Chris and Brian. This is an episode about a man who finds a VHS tape of himself as a teenager, watches it, becomes depressed about how his life turned out, and then spends the rest of the episode trying to make sure his son does not end up like him. It sounds like it could be poignant. It is not. It starts when Peter receives a check in the mail from the sale of his mother's home. His childhood house has been sold. The property is gone. But Peter remembers that all of his old teenage pornography is still inside, so he gathers the guys and they drive to the house to retrieve it before the new owners move in. This is the mission. This is the quest that propels the first act. 4 grown men racing to a sold house to recover vintage adult materials from a bedroom that no longer belongs to them. They arrive and meet the new owner, who is surprisingly understanding about the situation and invites them to collect whatever they need before his kids find it. Peter gets the stash home. The initial excitement fades quickly, as it tends to do with things that were more exciting in memory than in reality. And then Peter finds something else, mixed in with the magazines and tapes. A video, recorded by his teenage self, addressed to his future self, a message in a bottle from a younger, more optimistic Peter Griffin who believed he was going to become something remarkable. Peter watches the tape. His younger self is hopeful, enthusiastic, full of the kind of naive confidence that only exists before life has had a chance to teach you otherwise. Teenage Peter had plans. He had ambitions. He thought the future was going to be incredible. And present-day Peter, sitting on a couch in a house that is falling apart, working a job he fell into by accident, married to a woman who is arguably too good for him, and raising 3 children who are each struggling in their own ways, realizes that he has become nothing close to what he imagined. He is not a success by any standard, including his own. This realization could be the seed of genuine character growth. Peter could use this moment to reflect, to change, to do something meaningful with whatever time he has left. Instead, he decides to project his anxieties onto his son Chris. If Peter cannot save himself, he can at least save Chris from becoming him. So begins a makeover montage that is less about Chris's actual needs and more about Peter's unresolved feelings about his own life. Peter dresses Chris in flashy clothes. He teaches him to high-step around while wearing giant hats. He does everything in his power to make Chris the opposite of what Peter became, without ever asking Chris what Chris actually wants. Brian, the voice of reason that nobody listens to, points out that Chris needs to find his own path. Peter reluctantly agrees and decides to have Chris follow Brian around instead, on the theory that Brian is the most worldly person they know. Brian exposes Chris to Shakespeare in the Park, to art galleries, to the kinds of cultural experiences that Brian believes separate the refined from the unrefined. And Chris, predictably, does not take to any of it. He gravitates toward the same lowbrow interests that define his father. He likes what he likes. He is who he is. The effort to make him sophisticated is as futile as trying to teach a dog to appreciate abstract expressionism, which is ironic given that Brian is a dog who claims to appreciate abstract expressionism. But eventually, through sheer repetition, some of it starts to stick. Chris begins to show signs of refinement. He uses larger words. He declines Peter's offer to have old-fashioned fun. He starts spending more time with Brian and less time with Peter. And Peter, who wanted this for his son, is now miserable because his son no longer wants to spend time with him. The thing he wished for has come true, and it turns out the cost of that wish is the relationship he valued most. Chris overhears Peter crying about the distance between them. At a book reading with Brian, Chris calls out Brian's pretentious nonsense, demonstrating that while he may have picked up some culture, he has not lost his ability to see through performance. He finds Peter at a zoo, throwing tater tots at a panda, which is the kind of activity that only exists in Family Guy, but somehow feels symbolically appropriate. Chris tells Peter that he actually wants to be just like him when he grows up. They reconcile. The episode ends with a television news program talking over the family as they try to wrap things up, which is a meta-joke about the show's own tendency to rush its conclusions. Peter, Chris and Brian is an episode about a father's midlife crisis expressed through his son's forced education. It is about the gap between who he wanted to become and who he actually became, and how that gap can distort the way we parent. It is, on paper, one of the more emotionally rich premises in this list, but in execution, it plays out like a series of mildly amusing sketches connected by a thread so thin you can barely see it. Peter feels bad. Peter overcompensates. Chris changes. Peter feels worse. Chris changes back. They hug. Roll credits. The emotional depth is there if you want to find it, but you have to dig, and the episode does not particularly encourage digging. It encourages watching and then forgetting, which is exactly what we are doing tonight. Our journey continues with Season 10, Episode 17, Forget Me Not. And this is the episode that takes the concept of boring and makes it existential. Because nothing in this episode happened. Literally nothing. It is revealed at the end that the entire story was a simulation, a dream, an experiment conducted by Stewie to test whether Brian and Peter would still be friends if they had no memory of each other. 22 minutes of television, and none of it was real within the show's own fictional reality. It is the narrative equivalent of someone telling you a long story and then saying, "Just kidding, I made all of that up." The episode begins with the guys sneaking away from their families to play laser tag. Peter gets the high score and buys his picture printed on a fake newspaper, which is the kind of souvenir that exists only in entertainment venues and never in real life outside of those venues. When they get home, Lois is furious. Stewie questions Brian's friendship with Peter. The guys decide to head to the Drunken Clam. On the way to the bar, they see strange lights. They black out. When they wake up, they are in a hospital. Their memories are gone. Everything is deserted. The town is empty. There are no people, no cars moving, no signs of life. Just four men with no idea who they are, walking through a ghost town, trying to piece together their identities from context clues. They find Peter's car. Inside the car is the address of Peter's house. Brian's nose confirms they live in the area. They make their way to the house and start making assumptions. Brian, based on proximity to Quagmire, believes he belongs to Quagmire. Joe, finding athletic equipment, assumes he is a stripper. These are the kinds of deductions you make when you have no memory and no external information. You look at what is around you and construct a narrative that fits, even if the narrative is wrong. The tension builds slowly. Joe and Quagmire find the fake newspaper in Peter's house, the one with his picture on it, and conclude that Peter is somehow responsible for whatever happened to the town. They decide to kill him. This is where the episode tries to become a thriller, and to its credit, there is a genuine question being asked beneath the genre trappings. If you stripped away everything, all the history, all the shared experiences, all the accumulated goodwill and inside jokes and years of drinking at the same bar, would these men still care about each other? Would the friendship survive a complete reset? Brian defends Peter. He does not know why. He does not remember Peter, but something in him, some instinct that predates memory, compels him to stand between Peter and the men who want to kill him. Joe fires a gun. Brian leaps in front of the bullet. He takes the shot meant for Peter. He dies. And then Brian wakes up, because none of it was real. Stewie reveals that the entire experience was one of his experiments. He wanted to test whether Brian and Peter's friendship was genuine, whether it would persist even without the context that created it. And it did. Brian sacrificed himself for a man he could not remember, which proves that the bond is deeper than memory. Stewie admits he was wrong about their friendship. He also mentions, almost as an afterthought, that he conducted a similar experiment on Bonnie, Lois and Meg. They were fighting each other within 3 minutes. This detail is delivered as a punchline, but it is also the most honest observation in the episode. The men, stripped of their memories, eventually found loyalty. The women, stripped of theirs, found conflict. Whether this says something about the characters or about the writers is a question best left for a different kind of essay. Forget-Me-Not is the kind of episode that critics and viewers found polarizing. Some appreciated the high-concept ambition, others felt cheated by the dream ending. The Twilight Zone influence is obvious. The existential questions are interesting in theory, but in practice the episode spends most of its runtime on 4 men wandering around empty streets, having conversations that do not matter because they're based on false premises, building toward a conclusion that erases everything that came before it. It is by design an episode where nothing that happens counts, and for our purposes tonight, that is ideal. You can drift off at any point during this episode and miss nothing, because the episode itself is designed so that missing everything is the point. And with that, we have passed the midway mark of our journey through Quahog's least memorable moments. The sun has long since set over this fictional Rhode Island town. The drunken clam is closed. The mattress has been returned and discarded and returned again. The dry cleaner has moved on. The cooking show has been cancelled. The Bible stories have been told. And the amnesia experiment has been revealed as a fiction within a fiction. We are deep in the territory of episodes that exist to fill time, and we are filling our own time with them, letting the gentle rhythm of inconsequential storytelling carry us further into the night. Our journey continues with Season 14, Episode 8, Brokeback Swanson. The title is a reference to the film Brokeback Mountain, a critically acclaimed drama about forbidden love and societal expectations. This episode is about Peter, Cleveland, and Quagmire accidentally causing Joe to become a quadriplegic, and then trying to take care of him until they get bored and consider putting him in a home. The thematic connection to the source material is loose at best. The episode opens with the guys seeing an advertisement for a running of the bulls. Peter, Cleveland, and Quagmire want to go. They do not want to bring Joe. This is one of those recurring dynamics in the show, where the guys are casually cruel to Joe in ways that they do not acknowledge as cruel, because acknowledging it would require self-awareness, which is not something any of these characters possess in meaningful quantities. They try to mislead Joe into thinking they're going to a Chef Boyardee lookalike competition instead, which is an excuse so transparent that it only works because Joe either trusts them completely or has stopped expecting honesty from his friends. But when Joe shows up prepared for the fake event, they realise they are stuck with him and bring him along to the actual running of the bulls. The run does not go well for Joe. He falls behind. A casually thrown beer cap knocks him out of his wheelchair. He is trampled by the herd, and when the dust settles, Joe can no longer move anything below his neck. He has gone from paraplegic to quadriplegic because his friends did not want to include him in a trip that they should not have been on in the first place. Dr. Hartman confirms the extent of the damage. Bonnie, Joe's wife, leaves him and goes to Europe, which is a detail that is presented without much emotional weight, despite being the dissolution of a marriage. The guys, feeling responsible, try to take care of Joe. They attempt to stimulate him. They try different activities, nothing works particularly well. And as the days pass, the effort of caring for someone who cannot do anything for themselves begins to wear on them. This is where the episode could have explored something meaningful about friendship, obligation, and the limits of what we are willing to do for the people we love. Instead, it explores the fact that Peter, Quagmire, and Cleveland are bad at being caregivers and would rather put their friend in a state-run home than continue the work. They prepare to institutionalize Joe. Joe is not pleased with this plan, but the guys have made up their minds, and the convenience of their own lives outweighs the dignity of their friends. The resolution comes through absurdity, as it always does. Peter ends up in legal trouble and needs Joe's help. He goes back to the home and reveals what they did. They try to get Joe out, but discover he cannot leave without Dr. Hartman's permission. When they try to call Hartman, they discover that his cell phone was accidentally left inside Joe's back, and the phone was somehow causing the paralysis. They remove it. Joe recovers. Everything returns to normal. The quadriplegia was caused by a cell phone lodged in a spinal column, which is not medically possible, but is very Family Guy. Meanwhile, in the B-plot, Brian picks up a woman at a car wash. They have sex. Her husband arrives. The husband is a former Navy SEAL. Brian, rather than face the consequences of his actions, pretends to be the family's new pet. He lives with them. He wears a collar. He walks on a leash. He endures the indignity of being a literal pet, because the alternative is being confronted by a man who killed dangerous targets for a living. Eventually, the woman leaves town without telling Brian, and Stewie has to rescue him with help from Chris and, inexplicably, Vice President Joe Biden. This subplot exists in the same episode as the quadriplegia storyline, and neither subplot acknowledges the other's existence. Peter closes the episode with a Stand By Me parody, recounting what happened to each of his friends in voiceover. He gets into a fight with his two sons during the narration. This is the kind of ending that suggests the writers had approximately 90 seconds of airtime left and filled it with whatever was available. Brokeback Swanson is an episode about consequences that are immediately undone and friendships that survive despite every reason they should not. It is about the casual indifference of people who claim to care about each other, but consistently prove otherwise. And it wraps all of this in a package so lightweight that it evaporates from memory the moment you look away from the screen. Our journey continues with Season 9, Episode 17, Foreign Affairs. And this is another episode built on a foundation of mundane marital anxiety, except this time the marriage in question belongs to Joe and Bonnie, and the mundane anxiety takes them all the way to Paris. The episode opens with Bonnie and Lois planning a trip. Just the two of them. A girls' trip to Paris. This should be exciting. Paris is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. It is the city of light, of art, of cuisine, of romance. And Bonnie's plan for Paris is to have an affair. She tells Lois almost immediately after they arrive. She is not interested in the Louvre. She is not interested in the Eiffel Tower. She wants to find a man who is not Joe and sleep with him. That is her vacation itinerary. Lois is shocked. She tries to distract Bonnie with sightseeing, with shopping, with all the things that Paris offers to people who are not actively trying to destroy their marriages. But Bonnie is persistent. She explains that she and Joe have been growing apart. The distance between them has been widening for years. And Paris, with its cobblestone streets and its candlelit dinners and its reputation for romantic indiscretion, seems like the perfect place to cross a line she has been thinking about crossing for a long time. Lois intervenes when Bonnie draws the interest of a man at a cafe. She pulls Bonnie away. She reminds her of her commitment to Joe. She brings up their daughter, Susie. She does everything a good friend would do when another good friend is about to make a terrible decision in a beautiful city. And for a moment, it seems to work. Bonnie hesitates. But when Lois returns from a shopping trip, She finds Bonnie in her hotel room with a man named Francois. Francois is charming. Francois is French, and Francois is in a wheelchair. Bonnie, who is married to a paraplegic, has found another paraplegic to have an affair with. Whether this is ironic or predictable, or both, depends on how you look at it, but it is definitely the kind of detail that only exists in this show. Francois asks Bonnie to stay in Paris with him, permanently, to leave her life in Quahog, her marriage, her family, and start over in France with a man she met approximately 48 hours ago. And Bonnie considers it. She genuinely considers it. She tells Lois she's thinking about staying. Lois, out of options, calls Joe. She tells him what is happening. She asks him to fly to Paris and fight for his wife. Joe arrives. He finds Bonnie. He apologizes for neglecting her. He makes his case for why she should come home. It is sincere. It is emotional. It is the kind of speech that men give when they realize they have been taking someone for granted and the window for correction is closing. Francois also makes his case. He asks Bonnie to stay. There is a moment where Bonnie has to choose between the familiar and the unknown, between the man she married and the man she just met, between Quahog and Paris, and Joe, in a dramatic gesture, stands up from his wheelchair and walks toward Bonnie. He walks. Joe Swanson, who has been paralysed for the entire run of the show, gets up and walks, but it is not real. As Bonnie agrees to return home and they begin to leave, the camera reveals that Quagmire is strapped to Joe's back and legs, physically carrying him in an upright position to simulate walking. The grand romantic gesture was a parlour trick. Joe cannot walk, he never could, but the illusion was enough to win Bonnie back, which says something about the power of gestures over reality, or maybe it says something about how willing we are to be fooled by the people we love. Meanwhile, back in Quahog, Peter has decided to homeschool Chris and Meg because of a goat flu outbreak. His teaching methods are unorthodox. He rides a scooter naked around the garage classroom and encourages Chris and Meg to do the same. Chris participates and gets an A. Meg refuses and gets an F. Peter's history lessons are inaccurate. He is surprised when the math teacher he hires is black and the driver's education teacher is Asian, because Peter's understanding of demographics is informed entirely by stereotypes. A field trip to the desert involves peyote. The final exam reveals that Chris knows absolutely nothing. Peter agrees to send the kids back to school. Back in the classroom, Chris's actual teacher rides naked around the room on a scooter, having apparently adopted Peter's methods. Chris answers a question correctly. The teacher crashes and calls for a nurse. Foreign Affairs is split between two plots that have nothing to do with each other. In one, a woman nearly leaves her paraplegic husband for a French paraplegic she just met. In the other, a man teaches his children nothing while riding a scooter without clothes. Neither plot is exciting, neither plot is memorable, but together, they fill 22 minutes with the kind of gentle absurdity that washes over you without leaving a mark. You watch it, and then it is gone. Like a tide that comes in and goes out without depositing anything on the shore. And that is the rhythm we are settling into now, deep in the final stretch of our journey. The episodes are blending together, which is the point. The characters are doing things, but the things they are doing do not matter. The conflicts are resolving, but the resolutions leave everything exactly as it was before. This is the Family Guy that exists between the highlights, the vast, quiet middle of a show that has been running for over 2 decades. Not every episode can be a classic. Not every plot needs to mean something. Sometimes a show just needs to exist, to fill its time slot, to give its characters something to do for 22 minutes before the credits roll and the next episode begins. And tonight, we are honouring that existence. We are sitting with the unremarkable and finding comfort in it. Because the unremarkable is consistent. The unremarkable is predictable. And the unremarkable is exactly what you need when the goal is not to be entertained, but to be lulled. Our journey continues with Season 18, Episode 12, Undergrounded. And this is an episode where the central conflict is, quite literally, a man digging a hole. Peter digs a tunnel. That is the plot. He digs a tunnel from his house to a bar, and then the tunnel collapses, and then they get rescued. If you are still awake, I admire your commitment to the mundane. The episode begins at the Drunken Clam, where Peter runs out of cash. This is not an unusual occurrence for Peter. His relationship with money is the same as his relationship with most things in his life, which is to say, he does not think about it until it becomes an immediate problem. And even then, his solutions tend to create larger problems. The guys encourage him to get a credit card. Peter, a man who should not be trusted with sharp objects, let alone revolving credit, agrees. What follows is a spending spree. Peter buys things. We are not told exactly what he buys, because the specifics are not important. What is important is that Lois finds out. And when Lois finds out that Peter has been spending money they do not have on things they do not need, she does what she has done approximately 300 times over the course of this series. She grounds him. She treats him like a child because he has been behaving like a child. Peter is not allowed to leave the house. He is confined to his own home as punishment for financial irresponsibility. Now, a mature adult would accept this consequence. A mature adult would sit in his living room, reflect on his decisions, perhaps read a book or have a conversation with one of his children about the importance of fiscal discipline. Peter is not a mature adult. Peter is a man who, when told he cannot go to the bar, builds an underground tunnel to the bar. Let that settle in for a moment. The man dug a tunnel, a full-length person-sized tunnel from the basement of his house on Spooner Street to the Drunken Clam. This is an engineering project that would take a professional construction crew weeks to complete with heavy machinery. Peter apparently did it by himself, with hand tools, in a span of time that the show does not bother to specify, because specifying it would only raise more questions. He shows the tunnel to the guys. They are impressed, in the way that men are impressed by things that are simultaneously impressive and deeply stupid. They enter the tunnel. They celebrate. And then the tunnel collapses. Because of course it collapses, it was built by Peter Griffin, a man who once burned down his house trying to make a grilled cheese sandwich. The structural integrity of a tunnel built by this person was never going to be reliable. Now they are trapped, underground, running out of air. This is, technically, a life-threatening situation. They could suffocate, they could be buried alive. In a different show, this would be the setup for a tense, claustrophobic thriller. In Family Guy, it is the setup for four men sitting in a collapsed tunnel, sharing secrets about their lives while waiting to be rescued. Peter confesses that their only hope is Brian. He needs Brian to tell Lois where they are. Brian, who is at home, lies to Lois about Peter's whereabouts. But he tells Stewie, who manages to piece together enough clues to figure out where they are. A rescue is mounted. The guys are pulled out of the ground. They are dirty. They are scared. They are alive. Lois confronts Peter. She is furious, not just about the credit card, not just about the tunnel, about the lying, about the fact that Peter's response to being grounded was to literally go underground, rather than face the consequences of his actions. Peter apologizes, but he also complains that Lois always treats him like a kid. This complaint, coming from a man who was just extracted from a homemade tunnel he built to sneak out of the house, is a masterpiece of self-deception. The episode ends with a flashback to one of the secrets Peter shared while trapped underground. During their honeymoon 20 years earlier, Peter and Lois were at a seaside cafe. The chef could not make a chocolate chip and gumball pizza. Peter, upset by this, selected the waitress for assassination. Lois pulled out a gun, told Peter she loved him, and presumably killed the waitress. This detail is presented as a throwaway gag, a dark punchline to close the episode. But it also suggests that Lois Griffin has committed murder, which is a piece of information that the show introduces and then never addresses again. Because that is how Family Guy works. Information appears, serves its momentary purpose, and vanishes. Nothing sticks, nothing accumulates. The reset button is always pressed. Undergrounded is an episode about a man who cannot accept boundaries. He is told to stay home. He refuses. He is told to stop spending. He cannot. He is told that his behaviour is childish. He agrees and then continues behaving the same way. The tunnel is a physical metaphor for Peter's entire approach to life. When confronted with a wall, he does not go through it or over it or around it. He goes under it. He takes the path of maximum effort and minimum maturity, digging through the earth itself, rather than having a conversation with his wife about credit card debt. Our journey continues with Season 10, Episode 18. You can't do that on television, Peter. This is an episode about Peter starting a children's television show, which sounds like it could be entertaining, and occasionally is, but mostly serves as a vehicle for marital conflict so gentle that it barely registers as conflict at all. The episode begins with Lois going out and leaving Peter in charge of Stewie. Peter's primary responsibility is to keep Stewie alive and entertained for a few hours, which is a bar so low it is essentially on the ground. Peter puts Stewie in front of the television. They start watching a children's program called Jolly Farm Review together. Peter becomes immediately obsessed with it. Not Stewie, Peter. A grown man becomes hooked on a children's television show, while his infant son sits beside him, probably wondering how this is the person responsible for his survival. Peter loses track of Stewie because he's too absorbed in the show. Lois comes home and is angry. Peter, rather than apologising for neglecting his child, wishes that Lois was more like Mother Maggie, the host of Jolly Farm Review. This is the kind of statement that, in a real marriage, would result in a very long and very uncomfortable conversation. In the Griffin marriage, it results in a subplot. When Mother Maggie announces that Jolly Farm Review is being cancelled, Peter is devastated. His favourite show is going away. So he does what any rational person would do. He creates his own children's television show. He calls it Petey's Funhouse. He stars in it himself. Lois is surprised that Peter managed to get a show on the air and is sceptical about how it will work out. Her scepticism is justified. Peter's television lessons are not appropriate for children. His educational content is more chaotic than educational. He spends his nights working on the show instead of spending time with Lois. And then he creates a puppet of Lois. He calls it Saggy Naggy. The puppet is an unflattering caricature of his wife, presented to a children's television audience as a bitter, nagging woman. Peter uses the puppet to publicly mock his marriage on broadcast television. The consequences are immediate and external. Children who watch the show see Lois in public and attack her because they believe she is the real-life version of the terrible puppet they saw on television. Lois's reputation is destroyed by a felt creation with a bad attitude. She confronts Peter. She tells him the puppet has to go. Peter tells her to stop nagging, which is exactly what the puppet would say, which means Peter has become indistinguishable from his own creation. They negotiate. Lois agrees to stop nagging if Peter agrees to stop using the puppet. But Peter is about to do a dangerous stunt on the show, and Lois, unable to stop herself from caring about his safety, rushes to the studio to warn him. She arrives too late. Peter is already injured. This is where the B-plot intersects. Meg, who has been doing well in biology class, was given an internship at the hospital with Dr. Hartman. She shadowed him around. She discovered that he does not actually know very much about medicine. When Dr. Hartman was called away, he left Meg in charge, telling her she knows as much as he does, which is both a joke and a genuine indictment of the healthcare system in Quahog. Another doctor confronted Meg and forced her to leave. But when Peter lies bleeding after his stunt, Meg arrives from the studio and gives first aid, saving his life. Peter, recovered, admits that Lois was right to nag him. Lois says it was only because she loves him. And when Meg points out that she was the one who actually saved his life, Peter merely asks for a glass of water. Because Meg's contributions, no matter how significant, are always minimised. This is one of the most consistent running jokes in the series, and also one of the quietest sources of its underlying sadness. You can't do that on television. Peter is an episode about a man who replaces quality time with his family with quality time with a television camera, and then uses that camera to humiliate his wife in front of an audience of children. The domestic conflict is standard. The resolution is standard. The only unusual element is the puppet, which is a surprisingly effective metaphor for the way people sometimes create caricatures of their partners, and then treat those caricatures as though they are the real person. Peter did not see Lois, he saw Saggy Naggy. And when your understanding of your spouse has been reduced to a puppet, there is not much left to work with. These two episodes, Undergrounded and You Can't Do That on Television, share a common thread that runs through almost every episode we have covered tonight. They are about a man who cannot sit still, a man who responds to boredom and restriction and domestic routine by doing something unnecessary and destructive. Peter digs tunnels. Peter starts television shows. Peter shops for mattresses. Peter gets jobs and loses jobs and gets them back again. Peter accuses dry cleaners of theft and builds cooking show empires and overhears pocket dials and drives to Georgia for no reason. He is in constant motion, but the motion never takes him anywhere. He ends every episode in the same house, on the same couch, with the same family watching the same television. The adventure is always temporary. The status quo is always permanent. And maybe that is the most comforting thing about these episodes. The knowledge that no matter what happens, no matter how absurd or mundane or pointless the events of any given 22 minutes might be, the Griffins will always return to Spooner Street. The drunken clam will always be open. The mattress will always be there, stained and familiar. The dry cleaner will always be innocent. And Peter will always be Peter, which means tomorrow will bring another minor crisis, another pointless adventure, another gentle descent into the comfortable nothingness that defines life in Quahog. Our journey is approaching its final stretch now, and it feels right that our last full episode is one that was designed within the fiction of the show itself to put someone to sleep. Season 12, Episode 10, Grim Job, an episode where the premise is literally a father reading bedtime stories to a child who cannot sleep. This is an episode about falling asleep. We are watching an episode about falling asleep in order to fall asleep. The layers of meta-drowsiness are stacking up like blankets. The setup could not be simpler. Stewie is having trouble sleeping. Lois sends Peter in to check on him. Peter sits down on the edge of Stewie's bed, picks up a book of fairy tales, and starts reading. That is the framing device. That is the connective tissue that holds the entire episode together. A man reading stories to a baby, the most ancient, most universal, most unremarkable scenario in human history. Parents have been doing this for thousands of years, long before television existed, long before Quahog existed, long before animated dogs drank martinis and babies built time machines. This is bedtime, pure and simple. The first story is Jack and the Beanstalk. Jack's wife sends him to sell their cow because they need money for food. She explicitly warns him not to buy magic beans. Jack, being Jack, meets a troll who offers him magic beans in exchange for the cow. He takes the deal. His wife is furious. She throws the beans out the window, because in fairy tales, as in Family Guy, the consequences of bad decisions are always someone else's problem. That night, the beans grow into a giant beanstalk. Jack climbs it, At the top, he finds a castle in the clouds and a goose that lays golden eggs. He takes the goose. The giant wakes up. The giant challenges him to a fight. Jack, demonstrating the same survival instinct that has kept Peter Griffin alive for 24 seasons, chooses to run instead. He flees down the beanstalk. At the bottom, another fairy tale character, named Rumpleforeskin, is soaring the beanstalk down because it is blocking his view. The beanstalk falls. Their problems are solved. The end. The second story is Little Red Riding Hood. Red is given a basket of food to take to her grandmother's house. She walks through the forest. She encounters enchanted creatures. She meets the wolf. They have a conversation. The wolf gets to grandmother's house first, tricks her way inside, and eats the grandmother. Then comes the familiar scene where Red arrives and comments on the wolf's appearance. Big eyes, big teeth, the usual, but in this version, Red cannot keep up the charade. She acknowledges that she knows the wolf is not her grandmother, and the wolf agrees. They drop the pretense just in time for the woodsman to burst through the door and eviscerate the wolf with a chainsaw, which is a significant upgrade from the traditional axe. The remains of the grandmother are exposed. The woodsman rushes off to the next house. Red is left standing in the wreckage, wondering whether the woodsman was a hero or a lunatic. Screams are heard from the neighbouring property. This question, hero or lunatic, goes unanswered. Red does not investigate. The story simply ends. The third story is Cinderella. Cinderella works for her mean stepsisters. An invitation arrives for a ball hosted by Prince Charming. Cinderella dresses up. Her stepsisters tear her outfit apart. She cries. Her fairy godmother appears and gives her a new dress and a carriage. She goes to the ball. The prince meets the stepsisters and rejects them. He meets Cinderella, and they dance and begin to fall in love. At midnight, she flees, losing her glass slipper. The prince sends his men to find her. They arrive at her house. The slipper fits. They are married, and then they are separated 7 months later. Because even fairy tales in the world of Family Guy cannot sustain their happy endings. The romance that was supposed to last forever lasted less than a year. Prince Charming and Cinderella could not make it work, and the show does not bother explaining why. It just presents the failure as a fact, a quiet punctuation mark at the end of a story that was supposed to be about dreams coming true. Stewie falls asleep during the stories. Peter bids him goodnight. He checks on the other kids, and in Meg's room, she is seen having hanged herself. This final image is presented without commentary, without context, without follow-up. It is a dark joke, a throwaway gag that exists only to deliver one final uncomfortable beat before the credits roll. Whether you find it funny or disturbing or simply exhausting is a matter of personal calibration, but it is the last thing the episode shows us. A sleeping baby, a quiet house, and Meg. Grim Job is the third anthology episode we have covered tonight. After Holly Bibble and Take This Job and Love It. Anthology episodes are inherently fragmented. They do not build. They do not accumulate momentum. Each story resets the emotional baseline to 0, and the next story starts fresh. This makes them perfect for background viewing and even better for sleep. There is no thread to follow. There is no mystery to resolve. There is no character whose journey you need to track from beginning to end. There are only disconnected vignettes, loosely held together by a man sitting on a bed, reading to a child who is already drifting off. And that child had the right idea. We have arrived at the end of our journey through Quahog's most boring episodes. 2 hours of Family Guy lore, and in those 2 hours, nothing of consequence has happened. No characters have died and stayed dead. No timelines have been altered. No villains have been defeated. No lessons have been permanently learned. The Griffin family, at the end of this marathon of mediocrity, is exactly where they were at the beginning. On their couch, in their house, in their town. Watching television, or arguing about dinner, or ignoring Meg, or doing any of the 1,000 small forgettable things that fill the space between the episodes people actually remember. And there is something beautiful about that, about the fact that a show can run for over 400 episodes across more than 2 decades and still have this vast, uncharted territory of the unremarkable. Not every episode of anything can be special. Not every story needs stakes. Not every plot needs to build towards something meaningful. Sometimes a show just needs to exist, to fill its time slot, to give its characters something to do for 22 minutes before the theme song plays, and the next episode begins its own quiet journey to nowhere. Family Guy premiered on January 31st, 1999. It was created by Seth MacFarlane. It has been cancelled twice and revived twice and renewed through at least season 28. It is produced somewhere in the neighbourhood of 450 episodes, depending on how you count the holiday specials and the direct-to-DVD movie that was later split into television episodes. The show holds the record for being one of the longest-running American animated series, alongside The Simpsons and South Park. It has won multiple Emmy Awards. Its highest-rated episode on IMDb is Road to the Multiverse, with a 9.1 out of 10. Its lowest-rated episode is You Can't Handle the Booth, with approximately a 4.2. And between those two extremes, between the 9.1 and the 4.2, there exists a vast middle ground. Episodes that rate somewhere between a 5 and a 7. Episodes that nobody passionately loves and nobody passionately hates. Episodes about mattresses and grocery stores and dry cleaners and cooking shows and retirement homes and butt dials and tunnels and children's television and Bible stories and fairy tales and credit cards and forklift promotions and white shirts that do not fit. Episodes that are by any reasonable definition boring. But boring is not a criticism tonight. Boring is the point. Boring is the gift that these episodes offer. Because when you're trying to fall asleep, you do not want excitement. You do not want surprises. You do not want the narrative equivalent of a car alarm going off at 3 a.m. You want the narrative equivalent of rain on a window. Predictable, rhythmic, soft. Something that fills the silence without demanding your attention. Something that asks nothing of you and gives just enough in return to keep the darkness from feeling empty. These episodes are that rain. They are the ambient noise of a show that has been running long enough to have forgotten more stories than most shows ever tell. They are the quiet hum of a fictional town where the biggest crisis on any given day is whether a man can find his old mattress or whether a cooking show will survive its first season. They are the gentle, unremarkable heartbeat of a family that will never change, in a town that will never grow, in a show that will never stop. Family Guy has been on the air for over 25 years. In that time, the real world has changed beyond recognition. Technologies have emerged and vanished. Political landscapes have shifted. Entire industries have risen and fallen. But in Quahog, the drunken clam is still open. Peter is still drinking Pawtucket Patriot Ale. Lois is still shopping at the grocery store. Brian is still pretending to be an intellectual. Stewie is still building things and plotting things and speaking in an accent that he may or may not actually have. Chris is still Chris. And Meg is still Meg, which is the saddest sentence in this entire script. The world outside your window may be complicated. It may be loud. It may be demanding and unpredictable and exhausting in ways that make you wish you could just turn it off and go to sleep. And that is exactly what you're doing right now. You are turning off the complicated world and tuning into the simplest one available. A world where a mattress can be the central conflict of an evening, where a missing shirt can consume a week, where the biggest adventure a group of friends can go on is a road trip that ends with them doing yard work in Georgia. So whether you made it all the way through, listening to every episode, every subplot, every forgettable detail about every forgettable story, or whether you drifted off somewhere around Peter's dry cleaner dispute, your head nodding, your eyes closing, the sound of this narration becoming just another layer of background noise in the comfortable darkness of wherever you are right now. Thank you for spending the evening in Quahog, the most boring corners of it anyway. The mattress is back on the curb, the dry cleaner is closed for the night, the cooking show has been cancelled, the tunnel has been filled in, the fairy tales have been told, and somewhere in Quahog, on Spooner Street, in a house that looks exactly the way it has looked since 1999, Peter Griffin is sitting on his couch. Lois is in the kitchen. Brian is drinking a martini. Stewie is planning something. Chris is watching television. And Meg is there too, somewhere, unnoticed as always. Nothing is happening. Nothing needs to happen. The credits are rolling, and you are exactly where you need to be. Sleep well, but before we fully close our eyes and let the gentle hum of Quahog carry us off, there is one more episode that deserves our attention. One more slice of the ordinary. One more chapter in the encyclopedia of nothing much happening. And this one comes from the earlier seasons, when the show was still finding its footing in its post-cancellation return, and the writers were producing episodes at a pace that occasionally required them to build entire storylines around things as minor as a workplace injury and a typing assignment. Our final episode is Season 5, Episode 5, Whistle While Your Wife Works. And if the title sounds like it should be a light, breezy affair about domestic harmony and professional cooperation, that is because it is exactly that. It is an episode where the most dramatic event is Peter hurting his hand with fireworks and then needing his wife to come to his office and type for him while it heals. That is the story. A man with an injured hand and a woman who typers. It begins with Quagmire returning from Florida with fireworks. This is the kind of setup that could go anywhere. Fireworks in the hands of these characters could lead to explosions, fires, property damage on a grand scale. But the show chooses the most physically specific and oddly mundane consequence. The fireworks go off prematurely. Peter's fingers are severed, scattered. He has to collect them so they can be reattached. This is technically a medical emergency, and it is treated with roughly the same urgency as a spilled drink. Peter gets his fingers reattached. Life moves on, but the hand is not fully healed, and his productivity at work suffers as a result. Angela, his supervisor at the Pawtucket Brewery, notices. She tells him his output has declined. She tells him to improve or face termination. Peter explains that his hand is the problem. Angela does not care. Bosses in Quahog, like bosses everywhere, are interested in results, not excuses. The reason you cannot do your job is less important than the fact that you cannot do your job. Lois, hearing about Peter's predicament, comes to the brewery to help. She will type for him. She will do the paperwork that his injured hand cannot manage. This is an act of genuine spousal support, the kind of thing that real couples do for each other when one person is struggling. Lois sits at Peter's desk. She takes over the typing. She helps him get caught up on his workload. And for a moment, everything is functional and cooperative and boring in the best possible way. But this is Peter Griffin, and Peter cannot let a good thing remain simply good. He starts imagining that Lois is his secretary, not his wife who came to help him, his secretary. And once that fantasy takes hold, he begins behaving accordingly. He makes advances, he makes suggestions, he turns a functional workplace arrangement into something that is decidedly not in the employee handbook. Lois, after initial resistance, goes along with it. She discovers that she enjoys the dynamic. They pursue their activities in Peter's office. Angela presumably remains unaware, or at least chooses to remain unaware, which is the corporate equivalent of looking the other way. This is the A-plot. A man hurts his hand. His wife helps him at work. They become intimate at the office. His productivity presumably improves, although the show does not confirm this. The hand heals. Life returns to normal. The narrative tension, such as it is, exists entirely between the moment Peter's fingers are scattered by fireworks and the moment Lois sits down at his desk. After that, the episode coasts on the mild impropriety of a married couple behaving inappropriately in a professional setting, which is funny for about 30 seconds and then just becomes two people in an office doing things that have nothing to do with beer production. The B-plot involves Brian and his girlfriend Gillian. Brian has been dating Gillian but does not want Stewie to meet her. Stewie assumes this is because Gillian is unattractive. Brian, to prove Stewie wrong, introduces them. Gillian is not unattractive. She is, by conventional standards, very attractive. The actual reason Brian did not want Stewie to meet her is that Gillian is not particularly intelligent. She is the kind of person who asks whether a glass of water is diet. And Brian, who has built his entire identity around being the smartest person in any room, is embarrassed to be dating someone who undermines that image. Stewie, being Stewie, immediately exploits this insecurity. He tricks Gillian into coming to the house for dinner, where Lois teases Brian about dating someone so different from his intellectual persona. Brian admits that the relationship is based on physical attraction and that he should probably end it. Stewie encourages him to do so. Brian drives to Gillian's house, prepared to break up with her. Stewie waits in the car. Brian goes inside. And then, instead of having the difficult conversation, Brian is distracted and ends up doing exactly the opposite of breaking up with her. Stewie, still waiting in the car, presumably understands what has happened and drives home alone. This is the B-plot. A man who pretends to be sophisticated dates a woman who is not sophisticated. He plans to end the relationship. He does not end the relationship. The status quo is maintained by cowardice and physical attraction, which is a combination that has sustained more real-world relationships than anyone is comfortable admitting. Whistle. While Your Wife Works is an episode about two relationships, Peter and Lois's marriage, which is sustained by a willingness to adapt to unusual circumstances, including workplace intimacy prompted by a fireworks injury. And Brian and Gillian's relationship, which is sustained by Brian's inability to prioritize his stated values over his physical desires. Neither relationship is in crisis. Neither relationship is at risk of ending. The episode presents two couples muddling through their respective situations with the kind of graceless, imperfect compromise that defines most long-term partnerships. It is not inspiring. It is not dramatic. It is not even particularly funny, most of the time. But it is real, in the way that only the most boring episodes of a 20-plus year animated sitcom can accidentally be real. And with that, our tour is truly complete. We have walked through 18 episodes of Family Guy tonight. 18 episodes that span from Season 5 to Season 22, 18 episodes that collectively represent somewhere in the neighbourhood of 6.5 hours of actual television, compressed and narrated into this 2-hour journey through the unremarkable. We have covered mattress shopping, grocery store employment, forklift promotions, dream job fantasies, dry cleaning disputes, retirement in Florida, ADHD medication, cooking show rivalries, road trips to Georgia, butt dials, Bible retellings, fairy tales, underground tunnels, children's television puppets, running of the bulls, Parisian affairs, fireworks injuries, and the typing assistance of a supportive wife. Not one of these episodes appears on any best of list for the show. Not one of them is referenced in articles about Family Guy's cultural impact. Not one of them sparked a social media conversation or a fan petition or a critical reassessment. They are the episodes that exist between the episodes that matter. The connective tissue, the filler, the background radiation of a show that has been broadcasting for so long that it has generated an entire library of content that nobody specifically remembers, but everybody has probably seen at least once late at night on a couch half asleep. the television glowing in a dark room while the town of Quahog goes about its business on the other side of the screen. Family Guy was created by Seth MacFarlane in 1999. It was cancelled by Fox in 2002 after 3 seasons. It was revived in 2005 after DVD sales, and Adult Swim reruns demonstrated that there was still an audience for a show about a fat man in Rhode Island who gets into arguments with a baby and drinks with a talking dog. Since its revival, the show has never stopped. It has produced over 400 episodes. It has aired on Fox, on Adult Swim, on Hulu, on Comedy Central. It has been renewed through at least season 28 in a deal announced in April of 2025. It is, by any metric, one of the most enduring animated series in television history. And in that endurance, there is an inevitability. When you produce that much content over that many years, you cannot maintain a consistent level of quality. You cannot make every episode a masterpiece. You cannot even make every episode good. Some episodes will be great, some will be terrible, and most, the vast majority, will be somewhere in between. They will be fine. They will be adequate. They will fill their 22 minutes and move on. They will be the episodes that play in the background of your life, while you fold laundry or eat dinner, or scroll through your phone, or, as is the case right now, try to fall asleep. These episodes are not failures. They are the natural consequence of longevity. They are the price of persistence. They are what happens when a show commits to existing week after week, year after year, decade after decade, regardless of whether inspiration strikes or not. Some weeks the writers have a brilliant idea. Some weeks the best they can come up with is Peter buying a mattress. And both kinds of weeks get produced, animated, voiced, mixed, broadcast, and archived alongside each other, equal in the eyes of the episode list, if not in the eyes of the audience. There is a version of this show that only produced its best episodes. That only aired when inspiration was at its peak, and every joke landed and every plot mattered. That version of the show would have lasted maybe 60 episodes, maybe 80, and then it would have ended, and we would remember it fondly, and we would not be here tonight, listening to the sound of a narrator describing Peter Griffin's mattress while trying to fall asleep. But that is not the show we got. The show we got is messy, it is uneven, it is bloated with filler and padded with subplots that exist only because 22 minutes need to be filled, and someone has to fill them. It is a show that has been on the air for so long that it has become a piece of furniture in the cultural living room, always there, rarely the centre of attention, occasionally surprising, mostly just present. And tonight, that presence is exactly what we needed. The Drunken Clam is closed now. The lights are off on Spooner Street. Peter is asleep on his mattress, whichever mattress it is this week. Lois is beside him. Brian is curled up somewhere, probably on the couch, probably with a martini glass still half full on the end table. Stewie is in his crib, dreaming about inventions or world domination or whatever it is that genius babies dream about. Chris is asleep. Meg is asleep, probably in a room that the family forgot existed. And Quahog is quiet. The streets are empty. The shops are dark. The Pawtucket Brewery is still. The dry cleaner has locked his doors. The grocery store has turned off its fluorescent lights. The cooking shows have been cancelled. The tunnels have been filled. The fairy tales have been told. The Bible stories have been read. The fireworks have been set off. The butt dial has been deleted. The retirement home has closed for visitors. The mattress has been thrown away and retrieved and thrown away again. Everything is exactly as it was. Nothing has changed. And nothing needs to change. Sleep well. You know, there is a reason people come to these videos, not just because they're tired, although that is part of it. Not just because the narration is steady and predictable, although that helps. People come to these videos because there is something deeply comforting about a world that never changes. A world where the same characters do the same kinds of things, make the same kinds of mistakes, and arrive at the same kinds of non-conclusions over and over and over again, for decades. We live in a world that changes constantly. Every morning brings new information, new crises, new demands, new reasons to worry about things we did not even know existed yesterday. The pace of change in real life is exhausting in a way that our grandparents could not have imagined, and that our grandchildren will probably find quaint. We are always adapting, always adjusting, always learning the new rules for the new world that seems to reinvent itself every few months. But Quahog does not reinvent itself. Quahog is Quahog. It was Quahog in 1999, and it is Quahog now, and it will be Quahog when the show reaches season 28 and beyond. The Drunken Clam will serve the same drinks. The Pawtucket Brewery will produce the same beer. Peter will make the same mistakes. Lois will clean up after him. Brian will pretend to be smarter than he is. Stewie will build something incredible and then forget about it. Chris will be Chris. Meg will be there. This constancy is what makes these boring episodes valuable. Not as entertainment, because they are not entertaining in the traditional sense, but as comfort, as reassurance, as the narrative equivalent of a nightlight. They tell you that somewhere, in a fictional corner of Rhode Island, life is proceeding exactly as expected. Nobody is in danger. Nobody is changing. Nobody is growing or shrinking or learning or forgetting. The characters are frozen in time, doing the same things they have always done, and they will continue doing them long after this video ends, and long after you fall asleep. Throughout this show's run, Family Guy has produced episodes that made people laugh until they cried, episodes that sparked genuine controversy, episodes that pushed the boundaries of what animated comedy could do and say and get away with. It has produced episodes that were banned from broadcast, and episodes that won Emmy Awards, and episodes that were seen by over 20 million viewers on their first airing. It has crossed over with The Simpsons. It has parodied Star Wars 3 times. It has killed a main character and brought him back. It has travelled through time and across the multiverse and into the depths of Stewie's psyche. But it has also produced the episodes we covered tonight. The ones where Peter buys a mattress, where Peter works at a grocery store, where Peter loses his fingers to fireworks and his wife types for him at work, where Peter digs a tunnel to a bar, where Peter starts a cooking show, where Peter overhears a butt dial, where Peter reads fairy tales to his son, where Peter goes to a retirement home in Florida, where Peter's white shirt goes missing at the dry cleaner. Peter, Peter, Peter. Always Peter, always the centre of these mundane storms, always the man around whom the most unremarkable events in Quahog seem to orbit. He is the gravitational centre of banality in this town, pulling everyone into his orbit of low-stakes crises and zero-consequence adventures. And somehow, improbably, despite being the least interesting man in a cast of already uninteresting people during these particular episodes, he is the one we follow, the one whose mattress we care about, the one whose dry cleaner we investigate, the one whose tunnel we watch collapse. Maybe that is the real secret of these boring episodes. They are not really about mattresses or grocery stores or cooking shows. They are about the feeling of being home, the feeling of routine, the feeling of knowing exactly what is going to happen and being okay with that. The feeling that even if nothing exciting ever happens again, the lights will still be on at the Drunken Clam, and your friends will still be at the booth in the corner, and the beer will still taste the same, and tomorrow will be just like today, which was just like yesterday, which was just like the day before that. That is the lullaby hidden inside every boring episode of Family Guy. The promise that nothing will change, the assurance that the world you're falling asleep in will still be there when you wake up. The guarantee that Peter will still be Peter, Lois will still be Lois, Brian will still drink his martinis, Stewie will still plot his schemes, And somewhere on Spooner Street, the Griffins will continue their endless, unremarkable, deeply comforting existence. For anyone still listening, thank you. For anyone who drifted off 20 minutes in and is now hearing this in the soft background of a dream, that is fine too. This was never about staying awake. This was about having something familiar to fall asleep to, something that asks nothing and gives just enough, something boring, something safe, something that sounds like home. The screen is dark now. The family is asleep. Quahog is quiet. Good night.